In this video, I'm going to show you how to use gradient and gradient mesh in Illustrator. Now, gradients work a little bit different than they do in Photoshop, and so you need to be aware of it. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw an object out. So I'm going to click on my ellipse tool here, and I'm just going to draw out a circle. And my gradient, right now I've got a white fill and I've got a black stroke. Now, I could take my gradient tool here, and I could try to drag it across there, but you'll see that it's not really doing what you would expect it to do. And the reason for that is you need to click on your gradient down here at the bottom. And now once I've done that, I've changed that gradient fill. So now I can click on my gradient line over here, and I can rotate it around if I wanted to do that. I can make it shorter if I want to do that. Go ahead and click on that one, make it shorter. I can change where those colors are coming in. I do have a couple of different types. I've got linear and I've got radial here. Again, you can adjust your gradient colors over here, and you can click on them as well. Now you'll notice I don't have any colors there. I've only got K, which is my key color, my black. If I wanted to do color, you'll see it's set to grayscale right there. I need to switch that over to CMYK. And once I've done CMYK, I now have all these different sliders. So I can, in fact, go through and I can start making whatever color I want. You can also change the opacity. If you wanted to make it a bit more see-through, you could do that as well. So that's generally how you're going to use your gradient. And in fact, you can have a gradient on the fill color as well as on the stroke. So be aware of that. You could have one gradient. Let me go ahead and make that stroke a little bit larger there. So I could have one gradient going on the fill, and then on the stroke, I could have an entirely separate gradient. So let's change that up a little bit. And now you can see on that stroke that it's actually got a different color. So again, those are a few things to kind of be aware of as far as gradients go in Illustrator. But let me go ahead and change this back. All right, so I've gone back to just the standard black and white that you usually work with. Oh, and I guess one other thing that I do want to show you, if you wanted to have a solid color here, so let me get, instead of white, let's change that to red. Let's say you don't want any color in there. Let me make that stroke a little bit bigger. Okay, if I only wanted an outline, I can click on my fill color, hit that none. I got to be on the object, so click on fill, hit none. There we go. Now all I have is a stroke, right? You could do the same thing. I'm going to undo that. If I wanted to have no stroke, I can click on that. So that's something to be aware of. But back to the gradient. The other thing that's really interesting to mess with, and it's going to take you a little bit of time to get used to it, is this gradient mesh tool. And what the gradient mesh does is it allows you to click on multiple points here and create this kind of mesh file, or this mesh that goes across your actual item. All right, so now you can see I've got all these lines that are going across, but you don't really see that it's doing anything yet. What you do is you click on one of those individual items. So now I've clicked on this top one here, and I can now change the color individually of those, and I can start creating these highlights and the shadows. So if I click on that, and I know, okay, well, I'm going to need it to be a little bit darker down there. And in fact, if I wanted to spread that out, I could even go, well, over here, I wanted to do a similar color to it, which is going to be right around here. I can click on the handles. I can start to spread those out a little bit if I need to do that. I can click on the items, move them around. And that's how you're going to put individual gradients all throughout. You don't really have the flexibility of that in Photoshop like you do in Illustrator. So that's a really nice feature. It does take quite a while to get used to it, and you have to understand how highlights and shadows really work in color theory. But once you kind of play with it and get used to it, you're really going to notice you can do a lot of great things with that gradient mesh. So again, to kind of reiterate, if you wanted to go with a more simplified gradient, just a simple line or a simple radial gradient, you can use this gradient tool right here, which is what you're used to in Photoshop. If you wanted to use a more complex that allows you to do more gradient, use this gradient mesh, you can really make things look realistic. You'll notice as you start to advance through Illustrator, you'll see, and you do research, you'll see more and more items out there that are really lifelike, and they're usually using that gradient mesh to make it look really, really nice.